Welcome to episode 274 of Grid Talk. Today we're here to preview the 2023 Azerbaijan Grand Prix. My name is Ruby Price, and joining me we have a full set of Grid Talk co-hosts. Tom Horrox, also of Monkey Seat.
Hiya.
Tom Downey.
Howdy doodly.
And Sophia Richmond, also of Everything F1.
Hi.
But before we get into the episode, we must thank our sponsor for this episode, BetOnline. BetOnline.ag is your number one source for all basketball info, stats, news, and scores. Get the latest odds and lines, including the latest player reports for this year's pro basketball playoffs. BetOnline is always your sports information headquarters this season, as we have you covered for all your sports wagering needs: basketball, MLB, NHL, hockey, right through to UFC and boxing. BetOnline is the fastest and easiest way to get your betting info, including live betting options and all your favorite casino and card games you can play right from your home. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to get in on the action. Be sure to use our code BLEAV, BLEAV, to receive your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. BetOnline, where the game starts. But first, if you enjoy this podcast, we would love it if you could take 5 to leave us a 5-star rating on Spotify or a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. And if you're one of the 72% of people who aren't yet subscribed, please consider helping out with a like and a subscribe. So it is back to Baku for Formula One after what has felt like an eternity due to the extended break after the Australian Grand Prix. And over these last few weeks, there has been some pretty big news in the Mercedes camp. Tom Horrox, I'm going to come to you to discuss it, but the main headline being that the Mercs have swapped James Allison and Mike Elliott, which sees Allison returning to the role of technical director. Tom, tell me more about this, and why is it a good decision for the Mercedes?
Well, I mean, it's obviously it's an opinion to say it's a good thing. I personally do think it's a good thing. Some would say you're trying to get the band back together. You know, you're going back to what you used to know was a good thing, But I think it is a good thing because Mike Elliott is a great. He's a great at the whole kind of development and planning for the future, and James Allison, fantastic technical director, real leader of people, real leader of men, the kind of person that you know if you're in a war, he'd be the captain, and he's the kind of guy that you want you want people to go and bat for. So he seems to be a bit more charismatic a character to Mike Elliott. So maybe on the ground, dealing with the here and now, he's just a slightly better fit for that role. And this has all come about from Mike Elliott. It's not something that, Toto Wolff hasn't wielded the axe. Mike Elliott went to James Allison, discussed it with him and said, look, I think this is going to be the best people in the right places for the team. What do you think? Because he famously stepped away from the Formula One team to take a more of a part-time role overseeing the technical positions rather than actually the day-to-day stuff. Now that we're in this new formula of Formula One and the slightly different role that is going to become, he's agreed to take it back on again, and I think it's a good thing. It's the right people in the right places, and although it's not going to have any major bearing this season, apart from maybe the old new manager syndrome, it's kind of future proofing the organization, because there were concerns, especially from me, that Mercedes were on a bit of a downward spiral and it was just going to continue. Sort of 2020, it kind of started towards the end of there, and then it's just gone from bad to worse since then. So this, for me, it may well be a return to form for them long term.
Yeah, absolutely. There's always the potential for that. And in other news, McLaren have formed a new junior driver program, which is being led by former McLaren test driver Emanuele Piero, and currently includes IndyCar driver Pato O'Ward, reserve driver Alex Palou, and highly rated youngster Ugo Chukwu. Please tell me if I'm getting that wrong in the comments. Sophia, what does this mean for the future of McLaren? And might they get to keep their own developmental drivers?
Yeah, it's definitely going to be quite interesting. Just reading about it even more with the new renaming of development drivers, because you can't really say young drivers with Pato and Alex kind of being included into the list. But the fact that there was no development drivers, or nobody in the kind of program from 2019 to 2021, they've been able to have enough time to look at where they can go going forward. And McLaren as a whole, because they're invested in so many other different disciplines, IndyCar, Formula E, and a few other ones as well, there's a lot of knowledge and skill for some of these drivers can try different disciplines. So I know Pato and I think Alex have both been in F1 cars for previous testings, but it also secures as well if they want to change disciplines. And especially, as you mentioned, the young karting driver, he's been around since 2021 in the McLaren development driver. He's doing very, very well in F4. He has British F4 karting championships. He currently is racing in Italian 4, and also he just completed the Formula 4 regional UAE championships as well. He's very young. I think he's like only like 13 or something like that. Very, very young. And that's a great feed going into his career in motorsport as well, starting quite young in this series and having a team like McLaren who, albeit haven't been the best in F1, but they have been doing very well in other disciplines like IndyCar and Formula E. It does secure him a good future leading forward in the next following years.
Yeah, it certainly does. And McLaren certainly, pinpointing their drivers for the next couple of, who knows, decades, depending on when they eventually make it to Formula One. We're seeing less and less of the 18-year-old, 17-year-old, even 16-year-olds at this point. But Tom Downey, after the final few laps of chaos in Melbourne, Ferrari had their appeal over Carlos Sainz's 5-second penalty dismissed by the FIA. Looking back at Baku 2021, where we also had a late red flag and one final racing lap from a standing start, which did have some chaotic results, but nothing like we saw in Melbourne. Do you think F1 has learned from their lessons after the madness of Australia?
No. Because if F1 would have learnt their lessons, we wouldn't have had the absolute shenanigans that we did have. I was going to say last week, but it feels like a decade ago now because I'm still craving F1 racing. You've still got 5 days a week. God damn it. I mean, if you look at obviously Baku 2021 and then Australia this year, they're not the same incidents, and I think what Australia proved is there's no one size fits all solution to a race restart. I agree with F1 wanting to get a standing restart and have as many racing laps as possible. I think that's the right way to go because we saw it in, I think, Monza last year when it ended under a safety car, and everybody, why didn't you do a safety car? I agree with the sentiments, maybe with slightly more coherence than that. But Australia is just, it's the inconsistencies because it doesn't make sense in my head, and we'll get into the Sainz penalty thing later on. But it's just, how some drivers can ruin other drivers' races and basically get away with it, and then another driver doesn't as much ruin another race, but then gets a penalty. It still feels like mumbo jumbo, and it feels like F1 are, oh god, people are going to hate me for saying this, especially after Abu Dhabi 2021. It feels like they're making it up as they go along, and it feels like it's just like they're just going, okay, we'll do that. They're just slinging mud at the wall and seeing what sticks. And there's it's just maybe they got Ant and Deck, just saying to race control right now, give Sainz a 5-second penalty or something. I don't know, but it's it's just there's still a lot to be learned from it, and we haven't got enough time to go over it.
Yeah, absolutely. We could probably spend an entire podcast on what's wrong with, or at least what people are perceiving to be wrong with the way F1's being run at the minute, and the FIA, but we probably wouldn't even finish that in a podcast allotment. But finally, Tom Horrox, this weekend sees the first sprint weekend of the season, and we are expecting some big changes to the format, but nobody seems to know for definite what that format will take. Some are saying we'll only have one practice session, 2 qualifying sessions, a sprint and a race. Some are saying we'll just have whatever. Have you got any idea what's going on? And do you have any preference for whichever format it ends up taking?
It's just peak F1, isn't it? It's the teams all come together and make a decision on, oh yeah, let's do this. That's a great idea. And then they sit on it for 3 weeks and just not tell anyone what's happening. it's now effectively race week. By the time you hear this, it's going to be race week, and odds are we're still not going to know by then. And it just seems insane. It's so what they've proposed, what they have proposed, just in case anyone isn't aware, was that it's now going to be a single practice session for FP1. And then we're going to have a qualifying session for the sprint race. For the main race, which is going to be the normal session on the Friday afternoon, stroke evening. Then the Saturday is sprint day, where we're going to have the normal qualifying formats that we have for a race, except it's going to be gradually reducing in time. So you only get one run in Q3. But again, details of that haven't been released. Then we're going to have the sprints, and then the sprint will not dictate the starting order for the race. That will be the Friday qualifying for that we already had on the Friday, and then that's going to be the race. So it's very much similar to the Formula 2 way of doing things in many ways. So personally, as a preference, I prefer qualifying, setting the grid for the Grand Prix, and the sprint to be a separate run thing. How we set that grid, I would quite like to see them trying a few different things rather than just doing the same thing, or maybe it's like one shot qualifying for those three, or even just a session, like a 20-minute session or something where they all just go out for 20 minutes and fastest time wins, that kind of thing. Maybe just kind of muddle around with it and show a bit of variety per race weekend, because with 23, 24, 25 races a season, whatever we end up with in the coming years, it's going to be a bit samey having the same race format every week. But as long as we know in advance Formula One so that everyone can plan for it, that's great. I'm on board with that. But again, just this lastminute.com way of doing things it's just so reactionary and knee-jerk reaction. And again, if they'd have come out 4 weeks ago and said, yeah, this is what we're going to do, fine with that. But they haven't, and it's just peak F1 for me. So who knows? Maybe we're going to have a full reverse grid. You never know.
You never know. And I also did see another complication thrown in the works by obviously the fact that the Pirelli tyre allocation for this weekend was set several months ago, so will the changes have an impact on that? Well, I guess we'll see. But let us know what you think in the comments. If you're watching this on YouTube, let us know on social media, all of that jazz. Together, we can find the perfect F1 format. We can only do it with your help. And the FIA certainly need our help as well. But let's start looking at this weekend then. Let's start off with Williams, currently in P10 with 1 point. All of the grid now finally, all of the constructors have a point. Australia, not really the best of times for Williams, with Alex Albon and Logan Sargent crashing out at opposite ends of the race. Tom Horrox, do you think they'll be able to fare any better in Baku? And crucially, when will Sargent get his first points in F1, if at all?
Sargent, I'm sure he will, definitely, and I'm sure it will happen this season and fairly soon, to be honest. He did. He's got the one time he has raced here was in Formula 2 last season, and he had a pretty good showing, qualified 7th, finished the feature race in 2nd, and by all accounts probably could have won as well. So it's he's certainly shown some steel at this circuit before. It's not really a happy hunting ground for Williams. They did have that podium with Stroll in, was it 2017? I think it was. But beyond that, they've not really had a huge amount of luck there. I think 8th is their best other result, maybe from 2018, I think it was. So they're not really. It should suit them a little bit better than other circuits because it is a lot of straight lines and they classically do not have a lot of downforce on that car. So it should be fairly slippery in a straight line. So watch out for them in sector 1, but then they'll probably fade through sector 2, sector 3. So if they're holding on to a position, I can see them potentially, defending quite well, but I can't see them advancing because once we get through that first sector, they're just going to fall so far back and they're not going to be in a position to attack, and they're not going to be able to attack under DRS. So if we have a bit of free qualifying and we get, Albon sticks himself in the top 10, then maybe there's a fight there for those positions. But beyond that, I can't see them progressing particularly far in the race. It's going to be a case of holding on. Yeah,
definitely. Sophia, Yuki Tsunoda picked up AlphaTauri's first point of the season last time out in Australia, but neither car actually really looked like scoring prior to that late red flag. Historically, the AlphaTauris have gone well at Baku, or at least one of them has. But do you think it might be a long weekend for the Red Bull sister team this weekend?
Oh, I just think back about Yuki with the duct tape, the gaffer tape for the wing. Oh my God. Again, this is the FIA, make a decision with the flags. Because Gasly finished 5th, last year. So it is possible that AlphaTauri can. Obviously, however, though, Nick de Vries is obviously racing. He's never raced at this track as well. So it's going to be quite unknown to him, similar to how it was in Australia. So I think it'll be difficult. I don't see either of them getting points. To be completely honest, I hope that Yuki finishes and doesn't have any issues. But as you mentioned with the Pirelli tires as well, that's also going to make such a big play. We've seen in previous seasons with, take Max and Lance Stroll, for example, with the tires going out quite quickly, more than what Pirelli was expecting. And I believe they had a similar situation of announcing the tire classifications quite early. And again, with the new formats, we don't know what's happening. We don't know if we're going to get extra sets of tires, what compounds those extra tires are going to be as well. So for AlphaTauri, I think for them to be consistent and both to finish the race, albeit definitely not on the points, is going to be a major win for them for this week.
Yeah, definitely. Tom Downey, Alfa Romeo currently occupying P8 with 6 points. They've had a slower start to the 23 season than they did last year. But after Joe picked up a handful of points in Australia, can they use that momentum to springboard themselves up the midfield in Baku this weekend?
I think Joe possibly could. I don't think Bottas could. I think Bottas' days are numbered, to be honest. He's just look off the pace and slow and just bleh. And I know everybody loves him now because he's the sort of resident bogan Aussie of the grid, with his mullet and his his pawn tash and everything. But it's if you look at their on track results, Bottas didn't score any points in Australia. When pretty much the rest of the grid who finished did. He was one of the only drivers who didn't. And then, if you look back at Jeddah, he was way down the order, about P18 or something. I think he was the last of the runners. Sauber's a weird one, right? Or Alfa Romeo, whatever they're called. It's a bit of a weird one because they, for a while, they were sort of like the plucky underdog, if you like, and then when the Ferrari engine, yes, I know there's an ice cream van outside. I don't think I can do about it. Anybody want a 99? No, it's the Sauber. It's 2022. They showed real promise when the new regs kicked in, and then they sort of just seem to slump. I don't know if they're not putting in as much R&D, or if there's what, or if they knew perhaps sooner that Big Daddy Fred was going to Ferrari or what. But it's just something needs to change with them, and hopefully when Audi come in, we'll see a different story for Sauber.
Yeah, it might take them several years, as the Aston Martin fairy tale seems to have done, but I think Alfa Romeo, Sauber are currently just waiting for, the Audi money to start pouring in and actually put some money into development. Maybe it's all tactical, finishing lower behind so that they get more wind tunnel time, so that when Audi come in, it's like, hey, look at all this development time we've got. Let's go. And then all of a sudden we've got Audi finishing P1 with, the most developed car in history. But Tom, Horrox, on to Haas, who are 1 point ahead with 7. Without that final restart, Hulkenberg might have finally picked up that first podium in Australia, but the grid reset meant he finished P8 for Haas. Presumably, the American outfit will be advising Magnussen to avoid hitting the walls with his rear end, but can Haas have a good, strong weekend in Baku? And how will Nico fare with his first F1 sprint weekend?
Well, that's a good point, it being Nico's first sprint weekend. I mean, would he have done one on any of his deputising? I don't think he did he? He did Silverstone, but that wasn't a sprint weekend. So, no. It's, in a word, the word is going to be no for Haas this weekend. They've not really, it's not been a happy hunting ground for them, particularly. I think Magnussen in the first year got them into the points, minor points maybe. Maybe Grosjean might have got the odd point here and there, but they've certainly not been competitive. It's not been their forte by any stretch. And Kevin is really under pressure now, and I didn't expect to see that from Hulkenberg at the start of this season. I'm glad we have seen this, but he's absolutely destroyed his teammate, and he's I think I'm just checking my notes here. I think he's finished all three. Is it all three races? No, it's not all three races at all. I'm lying. It's all three qualifyings he's beaten Magnussen in. So it's just very unexpected that, given that Hulkenberg wasn't always an amazing qualifier, but he really is just handing it to Kevin at the moment. So definitely a man under pressure. So seeing how I hope those two can work well as a team and they can push the team forwards and push on to those points, because Haas started off okay, getting a couple of points in the bag there, but then obviously McLaren have now flown forwards. Williams have got some points, and AlphaTauri, even with their car, have got points as well. So they certainly can't just sit there and say, okay, we've got some early season points now, we can rest there, because they absolutely can't. They need to push on and score points in as many races as possible, because for Haas, those results do need to come early. I know they've got a bigger budget this year and are hoping to develop more throughout the season, but I have fundamental question marks about just how well Haas can develop anyway. They've not got a great history of in-season development as well. So certainly for Haas, for this race, I'm not convinced we'll see an awful lot from them, but I certainly think that that Kevin is gonna have to step up to Nico, and that's going to be a really interesting dynamic to follow, or especially given their two history as well. But it's going to be an interesting one for them. I'm looking forward to seeing how that one pans out, but I would certainly like to see a double Haas points finish, but I'm not particularly convinced that's going to happen.
Yeah, absolutely. And moving on to Alpine, it is 8, 6, 7 for 6, 7, and 8 in terms of points and positions in the Constructors' Championship. But it was going all right for the Alpines in Australia until the second restart, when Gasly hit Ocon and they both retired, throwing away a very solid amount of points. But it was a racing incident. Sophia Gasly is still very close to getting a race ban from amassing his penalty points. Do you think it could come this weekend, and can Alpine bounce back and, in their own words, take the fight to Mercedes with the rumoured upgrades they are bringing?
Yeah, I mean, Gasly got very lucky without getting at least 1 or 2 driver points after the situation, albeit, yes, it was a racing incident, but it could have gone either way in that kind of case, I personally believe. But I mean, looking at the stats dating back from, obviously, well, I'm going to say from 2021, Alpine has been kind of consistent. However, their most consistent driver in the points in the last 2021 and 2022 was Fernando Alonso, finishing 6th and 7th in Baku. However, with Gasly moving over, Gasly's finished 3rd and 5th the last 2 races in Baku. So it is a track that he is quite good at. Ocon, not so much. I think he's retired 3 out of the 4 times, or something like that, like 2 out of the 3 times. So it's not his favorite track, but I do think Alpine could have a good chance. They're doing quite well a bit this season, albeit obviously the incident in Australia kind of put a damper on things. But I do think that they could be in good contending for double points for this track. You never know, really, as well. Baku's track is one of the most interesting ones because it is quite fast, and obviously the corners. It's one of my favorite tracks of the entire calendar. Would want to go to it at some point, way down the line. But for Alpine, with the upgrades that are potentially going to come into play for Baku, it'll be interesting to see how long they can last. I think they have the pace for good qualifying. However, I'm not sure that they can sustain a long-term race run, which is where Ocon had a lot of his DNFs, was due to, I think it was like turbocharger and an engine problem. So we'll see how it goes with that. But I do think that they're good contending to be both in the points for this weekend coming.
Yeah, they certainly need to make up for Australia at the very least. But Tom, a team who did end up capitalising on the misfortune in Australia, McLaren, getting double points, which is actually the second time in 2 Australian Grand Prix they've had double points. But Piastri seemingly proving to have made the right decision choosing McLaren so far, at least. And they're expected to be bringing maybe a B-spec car to Baku. No confirmation yet, but we might get that at the same time we get some form of confirmation from the FIA about what's going on this weekend. Will this put them Baku in business, and how do you expect to see them performing in Azerbaijan this weekend?
I think they better Baku up their performance from Australia, just to really prove that it wasn't it wasn't a one-time fluke. I've heard rumours that they are bringing a B-spec car, but I can't remember if if it was McLaren bringing it to Baku, or if it was Mercedes bringing it to Baku, and then the other one bringing it to Imola, I honestly can't remember. That upgrade package, provided it actually works, a bit of a crucial point, cannot come soon enough for them, because yes, they scored double points in Australia, but it was because of a couple of other cars' misfortune. We could say. I think Piastri. At first, right, I thought Danny Rick's probably laughing to himself, thinking, I got paid $20 million, whatever it was, to not drive that car. Because let's be fair, when we saw McLaren in Bahrain, I felt for McLaren fans, and then it's not looked great for them. As I can see, Tom just trying not to roll his eyes. But they showed more signs of promise in Australia, and what's his name, Piastri. He's putting in a couple of good overtakes, especially in sort of like turn 9, 10, that fast sort of left right section. They obviously need to improve the car. They don't need us to tell them that. I mean, I doubt they're listening, to be honest. It's. McLaren, it feels like they've gone back to about 2017, or I don't think it's full 2015 when they first started the McLaren Honda era, which went so well. But it does feel like, especially if you look at where they were like 3-4 years ago, even 2 years ago, it feels like they've taken a massive backward step. So a lot of sort of fundamental redesign needs to be done. Hopefully now that they've freed up a shed load of cash with that. Now that they've got rid of Danny Rick, they can perhaps put a bit more into R&D. And yeah, I mean, Baku, it's a difficult setup anyway, because you have to think, am I going to focus on, sort of sector 2 into sector 3, so the big castle section, wind it through there, because that's fairly downforce heavy, or do you just go absolutely, sort of flat out down the straight? I think McLaren, they might be in for a tough time, because they're going to get caught somewhere, and they're going to have to compromise somewhere, and I just don't know how good a weekend is going to be for them.
Yeah, it's definitely going to be an interesting weekend for McLaren, and if they do bring this B-Spec car, maybe not quite the circuit to be, gathering data at, because if you push it a little bit too far, there's walls very close to the track in Baku, as many drivers have found out, including two-time world champion Max Verstappen. But we're not looking at Red Bull yet. We are looking at Ferrari. And Tom Horrox, this time last season, it was all about Ferrari and their title fight. This season, not quite going as well. Leclerc's retired from 2 races. Carlos Sainz relegated out of the points after a controversial penalty. Does the Fred Vasseur-led team have it in them to mount a fight for a win this season? And what do they have to do to turn things around?
Based on their past history at Baku, absolutely not. When you got your best result at Baku is Raikkonen in 2018 with a podium, it's not really great reading. They really need to go Baku to basics. There you go. There's a third one on the on the Baku pun list there. When Carlos Sainz is comprehensively outperforming Leclerc the way he is, I mean, a lot of it is down to luck. And I love Carlos Sainz. Believe me, he's my second favorite driver on the grid. But he's not as good as Leclerc, and he seems to be beating Leclerc at the moment. And I don't know if that's completely down to just complete luck. I know obviously he's had the issue with the car and then the grid drop and everything. So, but it's if Leclerc had Sainz's luck, then he would be a lot higher, and he'd be a lot higher up. And Sainz has even had the bad luck with the penalty as well. So, but they just don't seem to be there at all at the moment. And there was so much hype about this Ferrari in the off season. Oh, we've hit all our targets. Well, you set low targets and you're going to hit them, aren't you? So it's, I can't see it. I really can't. It's there's a double retirement here last year. I can see the same thing happening again. It's going to be any upgrades they bring will probably end up wedged in some tech pro somewhere along the weekend, and it's not a great situation for them right now. And they've got to, I mean, they're not so much looking over their shoulder too much, but they need to push on. There's no reason they shouldn't be as far down as they are. I don't think they've got to worry too much about McLaren. I don't think McLaren are going to be anywhere near them in the championship, to be honest. Despite how bad they are, they've still got too much pace, even for a B-spec McLaren, I fear. But they're certainly not going to be in the fight for the championship, which is disappointing at this stage. But hopefully, someone we're probably going to talk about fairly soon, Aston Martin, will be able to step to them and take on that mantle, with like Aston Martin, Mercedes taking it to Red Bull to have that three-way fight that we crave. But I think Ferrari, it's not looking great, to be honest. And it's too early to say how well Vasseur is doing, because it's far too early. You need to give him at least 2 seasons, to be honest. But certainly so far, it's not gone great. And I don't think it's going to get much better this weekend.
Certainly not. Sophia, Mercedes currently in P3 with 56 points. Despite a retirement from George Russell, they did look to have the second quickest car in Melbourne, with both cars leading the race at points, and Lewis Hamilton doing everything he could to outrace Aston Martin's Fernando Alonso. We've already mentioned the switcheroo of technical roles. How do you see the Mercs faring in Azerbaijan this weekend?
I can see them doing actually very well. They had a decent last season. They finished 3rd and 4th, even with all the issues that they were having with the new regulations, albeit obviously the double Ferrari DNF did also help them in their positions moving up the grid. But they've been quite consistent. They're the only other constructor that has won in Baku, with both Bottas and Lewis winning in previous years. And even if we look into 2021 as well, Mercedes did decently to an extent. In the podium positions, in the points positions. I think they're getting back on track. It'll be interesting with, obviously, as you mentioned, the new swap. This is the first race of this new change, so we'll see if it improves. I don't think it will make much of a difference this first race. I think we might have to wait until for another 3 to 4 races, maybe to even see like quite a change. But given this season so far, Mercedes is definitely stepped up from where they were last season, 100%. And I think that we can, that Mercedes can now actually maybe contend for another podium. Maybe, who knows, maybe Lewis actually might get his win. It was interesting as well, looking at stats today. Lewis now has surpassed Max, I think, for the most days without a win ever. So, which is really interesting, given obviously Lewis 7-time world champion. But yeah, I can see them both in double points. I would like to see maybe one of them on podium, but I do think double points is an easy contending for them. I can see them doing well in the sprint as well, because as you mentioned as well, they were very quick in Melbourne, and given that this street is quite fast with all the shops and turns, which is similar to how Melbourne is, they will be quite good contenders, and especially with the points into play in sprint now being actually decent amount of points, it'll be what they need, especially for Lewis to surpass Alonso in the in the driver's standings as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Tom, looking at Aston Martin, who are currently P2 with 65 points, what a contrast to last season. Second in the constructors, 3 podiums, and a car that makes even Lance Stroll look competitive. Will they have it in them to make it 4 podiums in a row in Azerbaijan? And how long until Alonso gets his first win since the Ferrari days?
Well, I think saying Mick Stroll looked quick is perhaps a bit of an over-exaggeration, but yeah, no, that car is pretty damn good. Even though it's apparently 50% Red Bull, 50% Merc, as some people would like you to think, which is 100% rubbish. I think barring something going wrong, so if barring a mechanical DNF or then getting wiped out at turn 1 or 3 or turn 9 castle section, whatever, it's hard to see them not being on the podium, to be honest. I don't think they'll get on the top step on merit, mainly because the RB19 is just a rocket ship. But if Red Bulls, if they have a mechanical DNF, or if they crash out, or if they get taken out, Alonso may well snatch a victory that way. I wouldn't be surprised if it does happen at some point this season. I wouldn't put it past what's his name, Alonso, to be P2 in Baku. Because he's a better driver than Perez, and whilst yes, the RB19 is the best car on the grid by a fair way, I think the skill gap between Alonso and his car as a package compared to Perez and then Red Bull, I think Alonso could do it. Especially as Perez doesn't always get the best of starts. I mean, Singapore last year, outside of that, but we saw it at Jeddah where Alonso mugged him going into turn one. So I think Aston is almost a given that they're going to be on the podium. It's like, all right. Here's a thought I just had. Is Alonso going to be the Verstappen of 2020, where we always had both drivers from the top team, so Merck in 2020, and then Verstappen was either P2 or P3 in several of the podiums. I think that's what Alonso's going to be this year, and then just sneak, perhaps sneak one or two wins every now and again.
The pair Alo and the Alo pair, just every single. Well, it's not happened every single because Australia, but you never know. Tom, what do we even need to say about the Red Bull team this season? An impeccable car, impeccable catering unit, and a number one driver who has been outperforming the entire grid to the extent that he can take a trip across the grass, lose about 10 seconds, and still be over 10 seconds up the road from the nearest challenger. If we are talking about Red Bull having super DRS before, that 2.2 kilometer main straight in Baku this weekend is going to feel relatively short for Verstappen and Perez.
You say that, but Verstappen has retired here 3 times out of the 5 times we've raced here. So there's, I'm not going to say it's a slam dunk. Red Bull do have history. They have won here 3 times, but they've won here with 3 different drivers. So that's quite an interesting stat in itself. There, it does breed chaos. It does breed surprise results. I mean, you just got to look at Hamilton's only won here once, despite the dominant cars he's had. Bottas could have won here twice had it not been for a bad puncture. So surprise results do happen. Perez got on a podium here in a Force India. So just because they've got a very fast car, I wouldn't be surprised to see something different. So don't worry, listeners, there's going to be a surprise this weekend. It's not going to be another Red Bull domination. And if they're going to be the quickest, obviously they're going to be the quickest car. But I don't think it's going to be a domination. I think they'll certainly be the quickest in the race, but I think it's going to be a lot closer. There's probably going to be safety cars. There's probably going to be a red flag. There's probably going to be weird strategy things are going to come into play due to ill-timed safety cars and debris and things like that. And like Anton Deck saying something to spice up the racing, probably knowing the way things are panning out. So there's not much to say about how they're going to do. We know who's the lead driver in that team. We know how things are going to pan out. We know how good Perez is at street circuits, but even with that, he's not going to be a match for Max Verstappen. We know all that, but what we don't know is what Baku is going to bring us, because it's a mystical place where the predictable gods of Formula One never actually turn up to. So it's I'm just looking forward to the ride, and with there being a sprint race, and we don't even know what the race format is yet, so it's going to be insane, and I'm here for it.
It is certainly going to be insane, but that is our look at the constructors and prediction and assuming kind of what they're going to be getting up to this weekend. But time for some predictions. Let's start off with some podium predictions. So Sophia, I'll let you take it off from here.
Oh, okay. I think it's going to be Perez P1, followed by Alonso P2, and I'll say an Alpine. I'll say Gasly P3. That's also my bold prediction right there as well, with a no Max podium. But yeah, Perez, Alonso, Gasly is my podium.
Perez, Alonso, Gasly. Tom Downey, do you echo that sentiment, or what's your podium prediction?
Absolutely not. As I see Sophia just violently shaking her head then. No, I think Max P1, barring no DNS, obviously, if he's going to finish, he's going to be P1. I think he's just unstoppable at the moment. P2, I'm going for Alonso. I think he's going to. I got a feeling, as a Black Eyed Peas said. And yeah, P3. I'm going to say George Russell, because he was looking pretty damn quick in Australia before his car turned into a barbecue.
the Baku IPs have got better songs than I got a feeling. Tom Horrox, your podium prediction, please.
Strap yourselves in. I'm just going to come out and say it. Alonso, Hamilton, Perez.
Well, I mean, that's 2 podiums without Verstappen on it, which is looking quite bold, which leads me on to our bold prediction. Sophia.
Both McLarens in points. They've been quite consistently in the points for the last 2 races, 2021 and 2022. Yeah. So I think that they could be in points, probably P10 and P9, but they're still in the points, and that's what matters.
A point is a point, as they say. Tom Downey, your bold prediction, please.
Both AlphaTauris in the points.
Well, that will be definitely bold if it happens. Tom Horrox, your bold prediction, please.
Logan Sargent gets a P7 or higher.
Ooh.
It's Baku, baby. It's Baku.
Williams' best result of the season, and it's a bold prediction. But yeah, I mean, it'll be interesting to see if it does happen. And now that we've got the predictions out of the way, it's time to give our panelists a chance to give some promo. Tom Horrox, you're from the Monkey Seat, as well as F1 Grid Talk. Where can people find that if they want to go and listen?
Well, like you said there, do a lot of stuff with F1 Chronicle with the Grid Talk podcast, and we do our fireside chats and obviously race reviews and previews, things like this. Always great to be involved with you guys. It's really a great community. I really enjoy being part of it. It all started off by me and a friend just deciding we're going to talk about Formula One, one of which didn't know anything about Formula One at the time, which is my co-host, Carl. So that's always fun when educating him as to who Damien Hill is. And it's like, no, that's Damon. Jesus. So it's if you want to hear 2 people spouting nonsense about Formula One who don't insult F2 drivers and get cancelled, then that's the Monkey Seat. So monkeyseatpod.com or on the socials at monkeyseatpod.
Don't know what you could have been referring to there, Tom. Every single F1 podcast is perfectly, uncancelable. Sophia, obviously you're with EF1 as well, but also Formula Talk and Grid Talk.
Yeah, definitely. So EF1, everything F1. You can find us on all social media at ef1.com or join EF1 on social media. Do articles not just about F1, but F2 and F3, the new F1 Academy that's coming up, Formula E as well. And then, as you mentioned, Formula Talk. So me and Tom Downey do a weekly podcast, and we've had some few other guests from the other Good Talk panelists in previous episodes as well, primarily talking about F2 and F3, and you can listen to it on the back catalog of Grid Talk as it is part of Grid Talk. And as always, enjoy being a panelist, joining with you guys for Grid Talk as always.
Yeah, and Tom, Sophia kind of took the Formula Talk promo, but is there anything else you want to signpost or just anything you want to say?
Like, comment, subscribe.
Like, comment, subscribe. There we go. That's for you, YouTube watchers. But on that note, Grid Talk is available on YouTube, where most episodes are recorded live, as well as Amazon Fire, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Apple Music, Verbal, and Pocket Casts. Just search Formula One Grid Talk for our back catalogue of shows with previews and reactions to qualifying and the race results. Please consider supporting the channel on Patreon so we can get mics, lights, and better recording equipment. Also, make sure you subscribe to be the first to know when each new weekly episode is released. We'll be back next week with plenty more F1 content, hopefully an idea of what's going on with Baku, but you never know. Thank you very much for listening to the Grid Talk podcast presented by Bet Online, and goodbye.